inviting me tonight. The reason she suggested lampshading and this whole notion of how to overcome story implausibility is because I had done a blog post at writerunboxed.com on the topic, and she liked it and thought it would make a good presentation. So the examples that I've already given you are the bonus for those of you who showed up tonight. Now, for the rest of you, this is sort of an illustrated version of the blog post that I put up. And a lot of these lampshading techniques have to do, and I'm Kathryn Craft, forgot to say that, I'm Kathryn Craft. And I hope you'll follow my blog posts on the second Thursday of every month at Writer Unboxed, but there's a lot of great posts there. So anyway, most of the lampshading techniques in the next book have to do with a point of view breach. So I just want to define that for you. That's when a character has access to information that there is just no way he can actually know. He wasn't there, he didn't see it. For whatever reason, he suddenly knows what's going on in someone else's head, even though it was never spoken aloud, that sort of thing.
Kathryn, are you able to turn off the PowerPoint at this point?
No, because this, well, I was going to go through the...
Oh, you still have more slides. Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So the book that I'm using for examples is Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. And all of the lampshading is about point of view because of the narration premise of the story. The first 131 pages are devoted to the narrator's memory of his trip down the birth canal. Now, how many memories do you have of your trip down the birth canal? Do you remember anything of it? I sincerely doubt it. Well, he not only knows what he went through, he knows what his twin brother went through when he came down the birth canal. So there's a lot for the reader not to buy. And Verghese uses many techniques to show us what that is. So let's just flip through these. First of all, if you use indisputable detail, your reader will buy it. For instance, he begins the story, after 8 months spent in the obscurity of our mother's womb, my brother Shiva and I came into the world in the late afternoon of the 20th of September in the year of grace, 1954. We took our first breaths at an elevation of 8,000 feet in the thin air of Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. That is the capital of Ethiopia. And we know the date and the year, and we know it's probably religion related because of the year of grace, 1954. Addis Ababa is at an elevation of 8,000 feet. So all of that verifiable fact sort of lends a certain plausibility to what he's saying. He shares his mission as a narrator. That makes us want to believe in his story as well, because he says, what I owe Shiva most is this, that's his brother, to tell the story. It is one my mother, Sister Mary Praise, did not reveal, and my fearless father, Thomas Stone, ran from, and which I had to piece together. Only the telling can heal the rift that separates my brother and me. Yes, I have infinite faith in the craft of surgery, but no surgeon can heal the kind of wound that divides two brothers. Where silk and steel fail, a story must succeed. To begin at the beginning. So now we're kind of intrigued that he owes this to his brother. He's trying to heal a rift, and we're going to let him tell it the way he wants to tell it. So sharing his mission for the narration. Oh, geez. I wonder what I did. Okay, hold on. Oh, there it is. I don't know if you could see it. I couldn't see it anymore. Okay. So he's going to admit that he uses some imagination to fill in details. In my mind's eye, I can see the novitiates lining the quay, chattering and trembling with excitement and emotion, their white habits flapping in the breeze, the seagulls hopping around their sandaled feet. So even though he's imagining this, he wasn't there. This is his mother coming from India to Africa. He still uses a lot of details that set the scene. So he's admitting his imagination, but he's using that sense imagery magic right there. Another way to dispel a point of view breach is to raise questions, the questions in his mind that inspired those imaginings. Was she fearful, he wonders? Did she have second thoughts? So then he tells us about a research trip he took to help fill in some of those blanks. He tells us how he traveled to Madras, where archived papers gave him a sense of his mother's life in the convent. So he's kind of telling us how he's putting this all together. Now, something very tricky. He is both the protagonist and the narrator, and he embodies other people's point of views, including his mother's and father's when they are first meeting, when he was just an egg in one and a sperm in the other. So when he tried to look at her, okay, so he is taking the point of view of his mother, who has just lightly knocked on the father's stateroom door. And when he tried to look at her, his eyeballs rolled like marbles on a tilting plate. He turned and retched over a fire bucket, missed it, which didn't matter as the bucket was full to the brim. And then later in that scene, as she gave him a bed bath, she was self-conscious, for she'd never administered to a white man, or to a doctor for that matter. His skin displayed a wave of goosebumps at the touch of her cloth. But the skin was free of the rash she'd seen on the the other four passengers she had been working with, and the one cabin boy who had come down with fever. So we kind of want to know what brought a nun and this surgeon together, and he's very sick and she's ministering to him and giving him a bed bath. And so it's very specific and we feel right there, and we're going to allow him to do this. So insert perspective conservatively. If you are using a narrator, I can't stress this enough, that a point of view character who must comment on absolutely everything that happens in a novel is an annoyance, not a help. They stand between the reader and the story, waving, saying, I need your attention. I need to explain all this. I need to tell you. And Verghese does not make that mistake. He allows his narrator to step behind the curtain of story and just let it unfold, only every now and then coming out to give a broader perspective, such as right here. The legend of our birth is this: identical twins born of a nun who died in childbirth, father unknown, possibly yet inconceivably Thomas Stone. The legend grew, ripened with age, and in the retelling, new details came to light. But looking back after 50 years, I see that there are still particulars missing. He says that on page 117. He's not even quite done with the trip down the birth canal yet. So these are all techniques that you can play with that will expand your narrative while keeping the focus on the protagonist. Protagonist as narrator, yes, he has to cross that line every now and then to keep you grounded in the fact that the point of view character is the one that should have the most at stake in any scene. But he will not trigger the slightest blip in your reader's suspension of disbelief. So this was a little longer than I thought, but I want to share this exercise with you because it's a lot of fun. So I hope you have something to write with. Your writers, I hope you have something to write with and something to write on. But this is the exercise. Make a list of 3 things that you know to be impossible. Write about one of them happening, paying close attention to measurable details and sensations. So I'm going to go back and tell you what I did. You can't take this one. You have to come up with something else. One thing I know to be impossible is that humans cannot regenerate limbs that have been amputated. Yet, I decided to write about a boy, an athlete, who very much wants his leg back. I would build that up, his desire. And he isn't going to believe it, but he really truly feels that his leg is growing back. So he's afraid to mention this because he knows it's impossible, but he decides to measure it. And each day, he still feels like he can feel his bones pushing against that skin at the end of the amputation, and he measures it and it's getting bigger. Now, the lampshading here that I've already used, even the point of view character can't believe it. You might add a witness. In my case, he calls in a nurse and says, look, I know this is absolutely ridiculous. I know it can't be true, but I keep feeling like my limb is growing. She explains about phantom pain, and this is just going to happen. It's your mind getting the better of you. And he said, listen, you don't have to tell the doctor, but can you do me a favor? Can you measure it? Because maybe I am making this up. So she draws a line with a Sharpie and she starts measuring. And wouldn't you know, his limb is growing back. And that will begin the story. So it's a fun exercise. So try to think of something you know to be impossible. You can, I made a list of 3. This was the one that interested me the most. But pick the one that interests you the most. Write about it happening, paying close attention to those measurable details and those sensations that are so important to getting reader buy-in. Add that lampshading. Even the point of view character can't believe it. And if that's not enough, add a witness who can't believe it either. It's super fun. So that is the end of my formal presentation. Thank you for listening. And you can read more about my novels at www.kathryncraft.com. As you can see, it's a very tricky spelling because it's Kathryn, which no one can ever get, and it's Craft. I probably should have bought at least 10 more URLs, but if you write that down now, you will get it, or just look up Kathryn Craft on Google. I do have services for writers. I've been a developmental editor for 14 years, so I can help you polish up your manuscript and help your reader buy into everything you have to sell them. I also do submission package reviews, which are a query letter, a synopsis, and the first 5 pages. And I also have a program called Your Novel Year, which will start up again in January, which is a small group mentorship and series of workshops that will help inspire you to get your novel written in 2021. If you email me at kathryncraft@gmail.com, I can be sure to put you on that mailing list if you would like to receive the brochure. And now, I am done sharing. I am stopping sharing, and let's see if we, yes, look what I made happen. I feel so powerful.
That was awesome. Kathryn, this was amazing. The information is absolutely amazing. I have a couple of questions. Everybody who's watching, please put your questions in the question and answer box. If it's not working, feel free to put it in the chat box. I will try to address all of them. We have a question here that says, they've really enjoyed this, but they're not writing about magical stories. They figured that many of the things that you had mentioned would still apply. But they have ideas that may be out of the ordinary, but they're still in real life. So how do we not write ourselves into a corner? How do we, we're writing this plot and all of a sudden we find that the plot that we were depending on, or an aspect of the plot that we were depending upon, it's not working anymore. So
actually, Ann Patchett's example in Bel Canto is a really good one because it's absolutely set in the real world. It's got no magical realism at all. She just, she wrote herself into a corner by making this impossibility of all of these people who need to communicate, stay calm in an emergency situation, guns are on them, and they don't know how to pass messages or anything. So that's why she created the character again. But so that was an example, though, where it isn't even a ludicrous situation. It's just an unusual one where none of the people in the room would speak the same language, and she had to address that somehow. So she did that by making it the kind of event where that's entertaining the foreign dignitaries to gain their economic buy-in, sort of thing.
Right.
So that's a good example. But certainly all of the techniques I mentioned in the beginning, including that psychological through line, is so key, and the emotional turning points. This is so important, like that moment when belief happens. You're a non-believer and then suddenly you believe. That's another fun prompt. Find two completely different states. What is the moment when change comes? That is why the readers are reading. And we need to know that a little door is going to close. They aren't going to go back to that old way, especially at the climax. There's backsliding throughout a novel oftentimes, but that's so important at that big climactic change. We need to know they're not going to wake up and start the story again tomorrow.
Right.
They have moved on. So really paying attention to all the spotlighting techniques that you have at your fingertips, like added word count, the sense imagery, all the backstory, because when we're at a moment of big change, we're constantly filtering through all that we know. And that's true in a story too. So just stay really true to the psychological through line of your character and you should be good.
Thank you. Another question, and for writing something in to establish the settings in with fantastic elements, for the reader wants. What if the reader? I'm not sure if I'm getting this right. If the cover is already showing what the genre is, how much do we really need to include in that first chapter, those first few pages, in order to get the reader to take this ride with us? I mean, if it's a fantasy, they're expecting a fantasy. They're going to give you a wide berth. In a thriller, it could still be a little fantastical, even with a murder mystery, right? But how much do we have to play with? How much room do we have to play with, in that area? And how much can we count on the cover helping us along?
That's really interesting because I didn't know much about covers when my debut came out, and I thought it so interesting that the title and the cover and the backstory copy should not reiterate one another in a well-designed book. Each gives another little piece of the puzzle, and the first page is another piece. So I heard a talk once by Elvira Woodruff, that was her real name. She lives in Martins Creek. And unfortunately, her books, I think, are out of print because I haven't been able to find any, but she gave such a great example at the beginning of one of her middle grade books of a, I think it's an iguana who's going to be able to talk.
Okay.
But he isn't giving up the goods on page 1. But we needed to know it was a world in which not everything is exactly right. So I think it was a scene at night, and the kid wakes up and there's a light hovering in the corner of the room, and he looks out the window and there's no beam. It's just this light that's shimmering there. And he gets a feeling about it, you know, and it was just enough to show that's unusual, isn't it?
Okay. A hint.
Yeah.
To show some hints in there.
Hints, yeah. And foreshadowing of, you know, a la Harry Potter, there is not magic on page 1.
That's right. That's right.
That's a great example too.
So then my next question would be, how do you infuse in difficult topics? Because I know when I read your book, The Art of Falling, which,
Thank you.
You know, you dealt with some heavy topics, right? How much can you put in there before you overwhelm your reader, before they start to shut down, or they decide to become like armchair psychiatrists, and they're going to they just start saying, well, that really didn't happen like that, or I know somebody who said something, and it takes them right out of the story. So how do we matriculate that kind of information into a story without doing that, but at the same time, being able to sneak some of that implausibility in there to make the story interesting?
Yeah, I think my nature saves me in that regard, because my second novel, as you know, is set on during the 12 hours of the real events of my first husband's suicide standoff.
Yes.
Yet, when I came to write about it, you know, my favorite childhood character was Pollyanna. So when I wrote about it, I was well aware that I felt the full range of human emotion on that day. My kids gave me joy. My little dog, I didn't want to part with him. I worried about him during the day. The horses were involved because this was set on a little farm. I met the most amazing array of human helpers, including neighbors that I had written off as being nobodies. And they just sort of came out of the woodwork to help. Black humor, you know, like, I guess it isn't going to kill us, you know, like things like that, that other people like freak out, like, oh my God, did she just say that, you know? But that helps too. Just remembering that even during the heavy times, which is a funny word to use in regard to The Art of Falling, because it's a woman who has a skewed body image, and it's how it affects her relationships and stuff. She still feels joy, incredible joy, that opening dance thing, you know? So just don't forget that we're a rainbow of emotions.
And to infuse those real feelings into the moment.
Yeah, and it'll make the heavier parts and the sadder parts we'll understand the gravitas. If you don't give the full range, then in many ways it's just flat, right? Because you're just staying at the bottom. You're just staying in the muck and the drudge. You got to have the whole crazy ride.
And the characters come alive on the paper. Thank you so much, Kathryn. I know we're coming to the end of this. Does anybody have any more questions before we let Kathryn go? Well, I don't see anything coming up.
I'm seeing my COVID hair.
Oh, I've had those moments, yeah, but no bad hair days with this. Kathryn, this was amazing. We're going to try to put up your information, your contact information on our Pocono Liars page as well. So Pocono Liars, you know, we'll make sure to have that for you. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll see you 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't see all your faces. I'm sure I recognize some of them. Certainly I know Mike and Sahar, and I got to see them, actual people. But that is the weirdness of Zoom, that you're communicating sort of interpersonally, but you can see me and I can't see you. So I'm just pretending you all look marvelous.
Well, we're going to stop the recording now, but we're going to bring everybody up. So maybe if you have a few more minutes to stay with us, we can
Okay.
we can
That'd
bring
be great.
the real world here with us.